Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this session of Amalgama Forum, Trama, the mesh between art and language in Latin America. I'm Jane Solomon, Director of Partnerships of Amalgama, the non-profit cultural program that dedicates itself to championing the work of women artists from Latin America, Spain, and Portugal. We're delighted to have you all here today for this amazing panel, and we thank you for your donations supporting our public program. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Silvana Lagos, artist, curator, writer, and public programming lead for Amalgama, who will introduce our fascinating panel today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, and thank everybody for joining us for this conversation between Rosana Antoli and Marti Manen, who's the director of Index, the Swedish Contemporary Art Foundation here in Stockholm, as they will explore Rosana's body of work. To give you a little bit of background on Rosana, she's a visual artist based in London, and her practice is multidisciplinary, moving across drawing, painting, sculpture, and video, mostly with a choreographic and very poetic feel. Her MA was from the RCA in London, and she's also a selected member of the Royal British Society of Sculptors, as well as being on the International Advisory Board for the Institute of Social Choreography. Her work is exhibited, and she has been commissioned, amongst others, by the Tate Modern Museum in the UK, the Ryder, also in the UK, Pompidou Museum in Spain, Don Myro Foundation, Sotheby's London, and Wilfrid Lamb Museum. Marti, director of Index, the Swedish Contemporary Art Foundation, has curated exhibitions at the Museo de Historia Natural in Mexico, as well as Constellations here in Stockholm, CA2M in Madrid, Poneso Amaro, as well as being the curator for the Spanish Pavilion for the 2015 Venice Biennale, and notably the Momentum 10, which is the Moss Biennale in Norway. I will hand it over to you guys. And
thank you, Silvana.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, the idea is that we will have a conversation with Rosana focusing on her work. So it's going to be some kind of time travel, going back and forth and observing some core ideas that have been there all the time. We will use some images. I hope that you can see them. And we will start with one drawing that it's important for the both of us. Right, yes. Rosana?
Totally. Like this drawing was the first dinner that is the one that we have in our bags from 2012, when you did the exhibition at Centro de Arte 2 de Mayo. And it was the first time that I had a group exhibition in a museum, in a big art center. So this drawing was the first inflection work for me, you know, like here started everything. All my interest in movement, in performance started with this drawing.
And I think it's super interesting that we will talk about performance, performativity, we'll talk about movement. And the first thing we see is drawing. It's a big drawing, so it's some meters there. But there's suddenly something special with this drawing, is this figure that it's in movement, because you were experimenting as you would do all the time. And in this case, you decided not to stop in drawing, but to include video there. So suddenly we have another temporality and something that usually is more static.
Exactly, like my practice before this drawing was pure bidimensional, you know, painting and drawing, but I was lacking this element of time, and I didn't know how I could incorporate it into my work. But inside me was this animation, this movement, curiosity, and research. So here we had this drawing that was 3.5 meters. And we can see here behind, you can see behind one of the figures, it was projected. So that drawing was still all the time, but there was a moment that it was moving and the hand was doing faces and this kind of hand code. I think also it was a starter for my research with the gestures. It was already here, you know, without me knowing it yet. And here in this drawing, I think also I have all these elements that it just ruptured me, you know, this clock, like the time, like the literally time, very baroque, this scene from this film from Hitchcock, everyone that is in this pose, in this kind of awkward stillness, in this empty lunch meal, and the soundtrack, because also it had this soundtrack, very relentless, and to create this atmosphere for this scene. And it was the beginning when I saw like, okay, this is the way I want to research.
And in somehow, there's this idea of the scenography, there's this idea of a situation that it's difficult to grasp. We can feel that something is going on, but it's based on these small gestures. There's some boredom inside this situation, but there's a lot going on. And I think it's interesting to, as you said, to observe the details. So there's some repetitions, and it makes sense as well, that the projected part is in a loop. It's something that it appears, disappears. It's something that is there, but gives this temporality that will appear later on in many of your works.
Exactly. Here is what you said, like each figure is telling a story. It seems they have their own script, even if they are not real performers, no, but each one is doing something, and is a feeling, an atmosphere that I like also to give in my actual performance, is this awkwardness or intranquility, something that you are not comfortable watching it, something that goes directly to your gut, and here you could see this scene, and obviously there is some absurd element, what is this guy doing with the paper in the nose, what is this people doing with the sock in the hand, but everything together, suddenly you see this guy with the hands in the neck, you have these eyes that none of the eyes in the people in the table is looking to each other, so all that creates for me a dialogue with the eyes of the viewer, that it makes you feel this next eater that is waiting to sit in this table, you have this empty place there, so is looking also for this immersivity on it.
And talking about this idea of this invitation to the viewer to be part of it, and also I think that we can chat now to like some years later, you did this exhibition in Miró Foundation in Barcelona, and then we had also several items together in this kind of almost dialogue that it's happening in between, say, a series of objects, a series of time, a series of movement, and then this invitation to the visitors as well on how to relate to the material that they observe, and a material that is also in movement. And I think that there's something connected, but we can see a big step in this project.
Yeah, like I think, honestly, Marti, every time that you invite me to do something, I just have this thing, like I need to risk, like more. I don't know. I just get very, you're a catalyzer in my practice, I think. So here in this exhibition, I think this was the biggest jump I done. I still remember, like, when I was thinking in how I was going to approach the space and how I was going to approach the viewer, that was the first time I could have this opportunity to play with it. Also, Spytrage is this room that is under the building, it's kind of close, so it's very easy to create this atmosphere. Later, the soundtrack that we work with, the composer I always work with, Casa Servols, it was very hypnotic. It was like a mantra. And the sculptures, they were in movement, they were rotating, they create these shadows on the floor. We have these kind of drawings, three-dimensional drawings, like the videos in loop. I don't know, like suddenly it seemed like the exhibition was alive, like I was creating this thing, like everything, it was orchestrated in the same symphony.
There was somehow an idea of choreography here.
Yes.
With a series of movements. So like every single artwork was a dancer in this symphony that was going on here. And for the ones not knowing this space in Miro Foundation in Barcelona, it's like one of the most important spaces for testing things. And this fact that it's underground, you have to take you take the stairs down. So there's also a feeling of movement from visitors, that they go there to discover something special. And then you were really great on creating a feeling. Also, of course, because you know how to play with the layers of an exhibition, just what you were mentioning about having a soundtrack, having a movement coming from the sound that is affecting your body as visitor, because it was based on some idea of waves, of repetition, some slowness that was positioning yourself as a visitor in a mood somehow.
Exactly. Like, you know, like all my research of these years with loop and repetition, you know, it interests me a lot because repetition also, it creates something psychological in ourselves that help us to get this kind of consciousness that we are in. It's not in trance, you know, but we can let ourselves go easily, you know, and later you can relate it to rituals, to techno music. But this kind of repetition, it helps a lot for me to enter inside the exhibition. And I remember now 2 sentences that you told me there in the exhibition. One is like a question that I never did to myself before, that you said, how many artists do you think they are so obsessed like you with having this soundtrack in an exhibition, you know? And I was like, oh, it's true, you know, like, but for me, the exhibition without soundtrack was not possible, you know? So it was a matter of all the elements were really important. And later, the other thing that you told me, like that you said, like, have you researched your name or your hashtag in Instagram for the exhibition? I said, no. It's like, just enter. And later I saw this beautiful thing that it was the audience was there, record themselves dancing inside the exhibition. And for me, that was very beautiful because they just got contagious by this feeling. When you see everything in motion, like there is a ball, and later you are inside it, you know, and your body is asking to move. And for me, that was like, okay, this is working, you know, like.
Yeah, imagine like us for you or for all the ones that we were working with exhibition, to see people dancing. It's an amazing reaction. Like, you are proposing some movements, you are offering a sort of score with movements, and suddenly it happens. And it's just people there, and they are reacting to the exhibition and to your artwork, and they decide to be part of it, being part of this choreography. We can see that here we had like 2 films. Do you want to say something about these 2 ones?
Well, yes, like these 2 films, like the first one was all about, we can see this group of people with the hula hoops, you know, so they were sorry? This one here. So this is a group of people that we create these hula hoops with the same rubber as the sculptures, and they needed to move and be able to hula hoop connected with the others. So for me, it was important to see is all the principles I'm working now with either feminism and ecology, but before knowing it, you know, so how we are affecting the others and the others are affecting by our movements. So for us, it's very easy to move in our hula hoop, but if we try to join with the others, there is a social choreography we need to know and to be aware of the context, and suddenly become this beautiful mantra, no? And also the repetition for me as humans, it has something so poetic, that is the failure of it, that we cannot make twice the same gestures, we cannot endurance a movement, and that failure that our body has, for me, is the poetry that we have inherent in ourselves. So these people was trying to endure this hula hoop action as long as they can. And obviously nobody can do it forever, you know, and the hula hoop falling down, you know, like this reality of this gravity, you know, that is showing you, and this utopian action of trying to move. And the other video was the same. It was all these repetitive actions that I work with my performers in London, and later this state of trance, no? And we can see in the image that is Thelma Sharma, is one of the performers I work with. For me, it was very important also to work, when I work with bodies and in that moment, that was 2016, 2015, when I finished my master, that the performers were not young, beautiful sculptural bodies, you know, like the body has so much inscription and a culture itself, you know, that for me was very important to give us, I don't know, to take care of all these sides, you know, and to represent a woman shaking in the 20s is not the same that represent a woman shaking in the 60s, you know, the body and the feeling is different. And for me, something I wanted to explore. So all these trans movements were there in the screens, and later we had the performances there that I opened the performance to the public with the help of you and the museum, you know, like we have some performers that were choreographed by me, like the ones that you have behind, that they were dancers that we worked together the choreography, and they did their event in the museum. But later I wanted to make the exhibition more open, if it's possible, more immersive. So I decided to try to invite anyone who registered to participate in the exhibition and work with me the performance that they want to do. And they didn't need to be from the art world. You can go there and we could look how yourself could match with the principles of the exhibition and enrich it.
So imagine, for the ones that are not being there, that suddenly you get this invitation to be part of it and to answer at the exhibition at the same time that the exhibition is happening. So it was really brave from your side to do it, to be able to invite visitors, not just to be visitors, but to be something more. And for this thing, you did also a book, this one, that it's a collection of answers to your exhibition. And I think it's really nice also this connected with this idea of the choreographic, like it's not necessarily just you talking, it's in this dialogue, it's with this invitation to other people that could be like dancers, it could be art critics, it could be artists, musicians. And there was this multiplicity of voices. And then what was also beautiful was the fact that, yeah, they were owning the exhibition. So there was this shared ownership that was happening in a specific moment of time. And it's also interesting, this repetition or this interaction, this movement, this changing, that it's this circular loop that you have.
Totally. Like we agree with the museum that every Thursday we were going to open the museum for participation. So people register and they do that. And it was beautiful because it was people that was musician and they did something, people that was nothing related with art, they were programmers, and we worked with some programming videos to project, you know, like all on the principles. But for me also was interesting the viewer that arrived this Thursday there, and maybe they don't know that the exhibition is open to the public because you need to be reading the newsletter of the museum or my feed or my mail. So if you are a foreigner that come to Joan Miró Foundation to see the exhibition, maybe he's going to encounter a different exhibition. And if you go next Thursday, it's going to be the same exhibition with another input. And for me, that was very rich. And also in that moment, I don't know you remember, it was all the strikes of the workers in the museums in Barcelona. And there were many Thursdays that the museum was closed, but I'm so stubborn that I didn't want to stop the performance to happen because it was about repetition. So what we did was to do it virtually and to stream it, you know, so and to locate it in other locations. So it's still replying to the exhibition, but the exhibition was located in London, it was located in the streets of Barcelona, it was located in Madrid, you know. So for me also that was interesting to see how these everyday things that can happen to an exhibition, you know, when you open it, all the possibilities that can happen.
And there was also connecting with this idea of defining and drawing the exhibition, like this something that has a gesture, the gesture that is open to other people. But we could also see it in this level of abstraction and how to define the space through this gesture. And you were really brilliant on defining this abstract movement That it's something that is it's not difficult. It's not easy to explain. It's not easy to grasp sometimes, because we're talking about some things that are not that visible. Let's say, like we talk about choreography, we talk about repetition and movement, but you were including it in many ways in this exhibition. As we can see right now, we had a part of the space that was a canvas for a drawing somehow.
Yeah, that was the first time I worked in that piece. The first time I presented Chaos Dancing Cosmos, this rubber expanded like a drawing, you know, bidimensional drawing in the three-dimensional space. And for me, this was very satisfying because I could connect the physical body with something that is bidimensional. No? Suddenly my drawing was related to the performance, because it's something that in this exhibition was the first time I could do, because when I started my master in performance, I stopped painting because I had such a big tradition of painting of the uni, you know, that my BA was on painting, my father is a painter. So painting was a big part of me. So I had to kill the father, no? I had to, you know, like stop painting and try to connect my brain what I wanted to do. That was performance. But in this exhibition, I thought I could conciliate this thing, and the paintings that are there are the first time that I could do what I called performative paintings, you know, the sculpture that we can see behind us, Chaos Dancing Cosmos. It was like a drawing in the space. It was like another body doing performance, you know, like.
Yeah, and this idea of this movement that occupies the space, that defines a type of movement as well. You know, it's from a gesture that it's two-dimensional to a three-dimensional structure, that it's not necessarily clear, but it's showing this desire to work with movement. It continued with you. So you started with this way of working, and it was a system and a methodology that include many other things, as you did in Tate Exchange, for example, that you were like changing the possibilities of perception of the space with this type of drawing that gives to visitors and participants a way to move as well.
Yes, exactly. Like my thesis in my master was about social choreography. And for me, it's really interesting, you know, like what we were talking before, like this orchestration of the exhibition, the artwork, and to understand that we are part of the same, no? Everything is an ecological process. So this installation of Chaos Dancing Cosmos has been growing a lot. When I presented it in Joan Miró Foundation. It was 200 meters, and here at Tate it was 2 kilometers of rubber. So here at Tate it was huge, the challenge, because in this floor of the Tate we cannot hang directly from the ceiling, so we need to create this kind of a structure where we could put all that. And also these 2 kilometers that span through the whole 5th floor of Tate Modern, it just creates this immersive, this pattern. So you know that you are in the same subliminal space, no? You are recognizing some shapes, some forms. When you enter inside it, you are obliged to modify your body with the sculpture. So it's like without pushing you directly, because if you enter it's because you want, you know, it's like making you part of this sculpture, of this path, and play it with your body, you know. So your body needs to move, needs to trace it in a different way. And also here there were the performers, no? So there were a lot of elements here that for me were very important.
You are also playing with the idea of the stage here, like how to mark zones, how to define arenas inside the exhibition. I think it's interesting also thinking about the visitor, the viewer, the user, that suddenly there's a spot, and this spot is kind of reclaiming for a different performativity.
Exactly. Like here in this exhibition, it was the first time I had the possibilities that they come also for performance. It needs to be economic also, because it has a higher cost to have performance. So it was the first time I had a chance to have 8 hours per day during 2 weeks, performers there, physical, moving, like the sculpture, like the paintings, like the installation, like the videos, like the sound. It was the body of my performers. They were not only during an event of an hour that you know that it starts and it finishes. When you enter, they were there and they were performing and they were moving through all the space and they were reacting to the work and reacting to the viewer. And for me, I had really strong and amazing performers, but it was like a strong work to present this, you know. It was Marco Daniel that was the curator in charge of this part of Tate Modern, that now is the director of Jamora Foundation. Is like it was the first one to give me this chance, no, to say to see how I could make people, because this floor of Tate Modern was for participation, for people to interact with the artwork, but he wanted to give it this strong artistic character, no? So it was something very strong. I'm still digesting it, you know. It was like 2 weeks on a row on the Tate, and with all the interactions that were happening there with people and everything. If I opened the exhibition at John Mira Foundation, at Tate Modern, it was totally open for the viewer, not only the exhibition, the artworks, the performers, you know. I learned a lot there, like working so many hours with people.
Yeah, and everything was happening live somehow. So it was the exhibition, the time span for the exhibition was the whole period of opening hours. Yes. I was wondering about the relationship with performers. How it is for you? What kind of a score are you giving to them? Are you giving like specific instructions, or it's more a poetic approach?
I always have a libretto in my performance, the same like a sketchbook for my paintings, you know. Like I need a narrative, I need to see where I come from, you know. But when you are working with people that is 8 hours in the space, it's impossible that they are 8 hours following instructions, because, you know, they are not machines. They need to improvise also. I need to give them instructions, situations, no? It's more like a situation exercise, like, okay, we're going to have that. We do some exercises that is true that are choreographed because they work, you know, but later we work together. We did a lot of workshops of how to react to the audience, because that is really, really unclear reactions. You cannot expect anything, you know. It's a lot of uncertainty on it, because we have found a Tate that was so open. We have found people that maybe they didn't respect the space of the performer and they start to play. I'm not talking about kids, I'm talking about adults, you know, adults playing close to them, you know, because they don't know their coach. And it's beautiful that they experiment like this, you know, but for the performers, that thing is a little bit challenging, you know, because they cannot move freely. Later you have beautiful moments, like one day that one guy was stretching in the Tate and the performer start to mimicking him, and later the other performers start mimicking the first performer. Suddenly there were 4 people in the Tate doing this, and people that was entering, so these people moving in repetition, they decide to join, and they call me, Rosana, come look at this. Suddenly it was the whole floor of Tate Modern moving together with a bite, like, and you know, like sometimes there are these beautiful synergies in the space, and other times you have an audience and an energy. For example, the night of the opening, that I saw 2 people crying because the energy that night was so strong, so beautiful. Also the performers were singing, there were some words that they were saying, because all this exhibition is about the immortal jellyfish as a fictional character. So I create all this plot, you know, all these jellyfish manifest about mortality, immortality. And the performers read some of the sentences, and we create this kind of dialogue and repetition and songs with it, and all that with the movements. I don't know, it was really strong, the opening, like it was something really strong. And all these things happen when they let you expand, no? And so there are many factors you encounter there.
But in this case, there are many factors that you are also controlling on how to offer this emotional situation. And it's through sound, through light, through a construction of a space, but also to an openness that you can feel that it's possible to test, to do. And at the same time, we are still talking about one art institution. So there are some rules there. It's true
Yes.
that in this space, there's a lot of freedom somehow, because there's a connection with some ideas related to learning. There's this desire to discover that puts this exhibition in another context. It's interesting also that we are talking about like a short exhibitional time, because then the intensity was really high.
Exactly. I think that is really important. I think is the time. I never did this. The time here was very strange for me and very interesting at the same time, because the performance was not one day event. The performance was 2 weeks, and the performance was not 1 hour. The performance was 8 hours, every day. So that timing, you know, and also to see an exhibition. Usually the exhibition lasts months. This was two weeks, you know. So all the preparation, all the installation for the museum to be ready. And if you see the Tate Modern have these windows that are open, so we need to dark them to create this space. We need to put these lights that they were moving in the space to create this, because we cannot move the sculpture. We could move the lights. So it's just to create this kind of dancing mantra atmosphere, you know. So there were a lot of challenges in the space, but later, I don't know, it was really beautiful, because people, you know, we stayed modern, so people always pass by, come by, and it was always people entering there, and a lot of people, like it was thousands. I never had this experience. Thousands of people entering there, interacting with the work. Also, the people here themselves, the audience, is not only that you can go there, is also that you could choose like your path, no? You could listening all this manifesto, you could go to one side of the exhibition, or you can record yourself and be part also of the exhibition with your movements recording, you know. So it was going some steps further that first research in 2016.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, like in terms of image as well, like how you were testing things at Miro Foundation. That was a really clean and beautiful and really precise exhibition. And then suddenly at Tate, it was this explosion of multiple colors and feelings, and everything was a mass that was happening at the same time. So
Exactly.
This is this change probably from this first drawing to something that is much more complicated and advanced. At the same time, the generosity is still there, because you are opening the exhibition to be used, to be observed, but also to be interact with feelings. And it's interesting to see that it's the connection. It's coming through feelings, through these emotions, through these bodies that are there. You have been working a lot with bodies.
A lot with bodies, and as you said, with feelings. There is something that you say always generosity, but for me, it's something that is selfish too, because I always try to create this dreamy, you know, a state that is not our reality, but you can feel it, you know, like it's like a daydream, you know, like all this fascination I have with dreams is because you can enter to different landscapes, you know, and have different experiences and the feeling that you have with them, you know. And when I create these installations in the museum or these spaces, and I take in consideration the viewer, the sculptures, the videos, the sound, you know, all this is like creating this kind of Lynchian atmosphere, you know, something that you can get excited and your guts are moving, you know. It's something very visceral, what I want to do.
And then think about reactions. Yeah, you said that people were there staying and acting and interacting with the performers. How it was for you to see it live, because it was a lot for you as well to be there.
Yes, it was a lot, you know, like it was one part of me that, for example, when people was interacting with, because they had some sculptures like this, the Resistant Islands, that was a pendular sculpture, and I opened it to the public consciously, but there is a part of you as an artist, you know, that you are, you know, like you want, it's your sculpture also, you know, but you need to let it be, you know, and let the people to interact with it. So there is a part that is alert, and there is also another part that when you see people moving, the performers moving, and you are there in the space, you feel it right, you know. I spend there also 8 hours with them, you know, like every day with the same soundtrack. And imagine that the soundtrack was 20 minutes, you know, so 20 minutes during 8 hours. So it was quite mad, you know. And also I learned a lot about the bodies, the resistance of the bodies, the spaces that the performers also needed psychologically, you know, like all these things were very important, and I had to learn them through the experience, you know, like to see how we could order the bodies, you know, to have this immersion and better interaction with the audience.
I think it's really beautiful, these blurry boundaries on what what a visitor is and what a participant is, because here the way you had participants, you had suddenly this invitation that was extremely open to be there and to act and to be part of a choreography. So also to give them, after this visit to your time, this conception that there's a choreography going on, a choreography that can happen on the streets. And you have been also playing with it. You have been some art pieces and videos of this idea of the observation of the choreography as well. So it's like you can be working and defining a space and a specific time for a choreography, but also to observe this idea of choreographic movement in other places, right?
Exactly. Like I work, my research is always in the public space, in the private space, but I work a lot with the public space because for me, the uncontrolled is something that really raptured me, you know. And when we are in the public space, we find things that we cannot expect, and then is when magic can happen and poetry can happen, when things don't appear and we don't expect them. Like when we are in the studio, if we knew exactly the outcome of the work we are doing, this will be very boring, you know. But when the accident happen or when something unexpected happen, then is when at least my head switch on, you know, and make connections and make these situations and scenarios and poetry, you know. And is when I think it's just this soul of composer, you know, like trying to order all this, you know. For that reason, I prefer to be outside the performer of the performance and not be performer myself, because there is a kind of delight in watching the whole scene, like watching a painting, no? Like I need to see all the parts moving, and that caused me big, you know, like that is what I want to watch, you know, like this way.
Yeah, you were talking about this unexpected situation that happens in the public realm. But I remember, for example, during the opening of your exhibition in Madrid, in Centro, an exhibition created by Bowen Bailey Charteris, that visitors were acting really crazy as well. At some point, like this interaction with this sculpture that I have in my bag, that was this immersive room as well, with this idea of drawing. It was occupied by some people. They started taking some pictures, but you know, after some minutes, they were like doing more and more and more, and at the end, they were on the floor taking pictures and more pictures, and suddenly they lost control of the fact that they were at an exhibition. I think
I love that.
It's really beautiful that it can happen, you know, that you can facilitate the situation where it's like, okay, I don't care about the rules of this space. I'm just feeling this thing and I'm going to live this moment now.
I think that is my inner soul of shaman, you know. I love that, you know, that happened in this exhibition. Here at Centro, we had of this exhibition that we have in the background in Madrid. we had the problem of the architecture of the building, because it was like a open architecture. So I mean, what was happening in this floor was communicating to other floors, because you could see every floor, it was not a closed room. So I needed to play really, really, really well with the atmosphere to give to the viewer and to the exhibition this immersive feeling, because if not, as you can see, it was open. So for me, the work,
yeah. For the ones not knowing the space, Centro is really, it's like the postal house in the center of Madrid, if I remember right. Like this, it's a palace. It's an extremely big palace that has this idea of royalty somehow there. So how to make, how to create this immersive feeling in this space, how to be able to offer this to visitors. It wasn't easy, but you with Rowan did an excellent job, I think, on offering some glimpses first, like here, there's this sculpture as an entering, and you can start feeling something about movement and gestuality, and then suddenly you're entering another room, and you can be free there. There was a kind of narrative as well in this construction related to liquidity and waterish ideas as well.
Exactly. I think like with the exhibition at Tate, I started to work with all this watery thinking with the jellyfish and this immersive feeling. But here at the exhibition at Centro is when I took it further, and then it was like, okay, let's work further with this watery feeling where, there is no ceiling, no floor, there is no defined shape, all the everything is connected. So the sculptures communicate from one side to the other through the walls. It was nothing. It was nothing limited. The shadows were playing very well. And also when they gave me the possibility to have wall and floor painted in blue, so then you have no reference of the space you are in. That for me was fantastic, because then is when happened that, like people enter into this room and you have this soundtrack, you have the shadows. Here there was the first time also that I put copper that also create this reflection and this contrast of materials. I like it how it worked with a lot of poetry. And when I see people here just staying in this limbo space, people just come from the exhibition, watch everything, and everyone converse here. Also, this room goes in the center, no? So they move there, they just stay there, and they were floating in this space, no? And I like it that, like you could see that people was letting themselves go, here.
And it makes sense somehow, as an exhibition, it has no beginning, no end. It has two enter points, but there was this possibility of movement. So in this enter point, this is the main part of the narrative. But you are ready to be free, because before that you have seen other things. You have seen this collection of gestures. You have seen your drawings with your movement. You have seen other sculptures, and you are embodying the sound and feeling the floor. So is this invitation again to relate to art with all your body, not just not just your mind. It's all your body.
Exactly, and also I think I have something that is like, even if I'm looking all the time for the ephemerality, the movement, the something that is ephemeral. There is a very nostalgic part of me, very utopic, that is my obsession to grasp the movement, to translate the movement into other language, how I can grab movement, because that is what always called me, So with sculptures, with the painting, with the shadows, with the performers, with the bodies, I'm always doing this exercise of translating and capturing movement, to see how I can read it in other ways.
And this is why I think it's interesting that we're talking about exhibitions. Like it's a context that is offering you this option to translate, to jump from language to language, and to play with the limits of what the language is, and to be able to also create your own temporalities. I think that Silvana was also opening the floor for some questions at this point. So if there are questions, feel free to write them or...
Exactly. Thank you so much. That was so fascinating. And it's so lovely to also see this, like, you know, this collaboration that goes on between the two of you as curator and artist as well. So if anybody has any questions, it would be great to raise your hand and let us know if you have any questions. If not, I also have some questions. Yeah, I can't see anybody. Okay, so I can start. This thing that kept coming up in the conversation was this notion of like how the body takes up space, but also how the sculpture takes up space. And something that I kind of found that came up was like this idea of how the body is modified according to the sculpture, but also how the sculpture is modified with the lighting. So I want to understand, because that also, I see that link between the scripted and the mimicking, the control and the chaos. So I wanted to understand that a little bit more from your side.
For me, I think it's just like to play with things that are not defined, you know, because I want everything to be understood like it's in fluxus, is in motion, and is in constant transformation. And for me, there is something very anarchic and revolutionary that is to change simply the gesture and the position that we enter in an exhibition. If we, instead of entering in this position, suddenly we need to turn our bodies like this, it's a little act that is revolutionary, you know, that we are creating because we want to, you know, it's nobody telling me to move like this. And each one is going to move the body in a different way when they encounter this sculpture. And because the lights also interfere there and the sound, your body is going to read it in different ways. And that for me is very beautiful, how each body of us is going to read the exhibition in different ways and is going to interact differently, you know, and all these modifications of our behavior is really, you know, is a rebellious act, you know, is a resistance act.
Exactly. I think that's also something that you can see with, like, you know, the first image that you showed of like the dinner, was it? And all the small gestures and how you couldn't really, it was the unsaid, you couldn't really work out whether it was a grotesque gesture or if it was a really subtle gesture or like a really gentle gesture, which I think is also really fascinating about how we're constantly affecting each other in our movements.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's true. And connecting with what you were saying, Silvana, this idea of the sculpture in the room, one of the fascinating things with Rosana's work is that the sculptures have no limit. So a sculpture is something that is happening in a spot, in a place, but it's not necessarily stopped in a space. As we can see with these images in the background, you know, there's a lot of movement that is there, and they could continue forever. You know, you were commenting these 2 kilometers of line in Tate Exchange. So this is this idea of, okay, with this you can, it's a long book, you know, when you have this enormous line that can be modified and can tell many things in a space. Again, you know, I think that there's this subjective approach to the idea of the sculpture and the space and the place and the time that is opening to this movement from visitors. And you need visitors because then the choreography is happening when you relate to this object, when your physical body is answering to this offer that is there.
Exactly. It's like when the visitor experience by themselves the object and the artwork, it creates intimacy between the artwork and the viewer. It's not a passive thing. Suddenly you experience the artwork with your whole body, you know? So that's really interesting relation also.
I think something also quite interesting about the materiality that you also use, because you are physically drawing the space with the rubber that you use as well. So yeah, it does. You're essentially again doing the 2-dimensional into the 3-dimensional constantly.
Yes, Exactly, exactly.
Something that I actually haven't, because I haven't seen or work with sound, and you mentioned something about the loop and techno. Why, I want to understand a little bit more about the kind of sound that you use for the exhibitions or the installations rather.
Well, I work always with the same composer, and he knows me so well that depending on the artwork, I can tell him, this reference and this reference and this riff, and I want something like this. And later we work together for months, like he's a genius, he's really good. And later is when we found the rhythm. I am crazy with music, with sound, but I cannot make it myself. So I need a person that I can delegate very well and can read me well what I have inside, so he can translate it into sound. Because Adam Curtis said, and for me that is essential, that when you see a video, if the video has a music that is crowd rock, you're going to read it in a way, and if the music is music from the 20s, you're going to read it with other feelings. So the sound is going to give you or induce you also in the feeling of what you are perceiving.
Exactly. I mean, it's another way of choreographing, because humans tend to, like, our heartbeat tends to absorb different beats, especially within architecture. So by all means, you're also using that as the choreography within the space, which is really beautiful, I think.
And also the fact that the music is invisible, so you can't be critical somehow, because you're absorbing it with your body, and your body is reacting because it has this rhythm. And if there's this repetition, these waves that are coming back and back, suddenly your body is adapted directly to this tempo that it's there. And Rosana is really good defining this tempo, I think. And this tempo is what gives then us the opportunity to feel on a different way. And then it's to feel within the context of art, and to think then on what's this type of experience. Are we able to feel this way in other contexts or not? Do we accept it? Can we talk about it? Can we find a language to talk about it? So suddenly there are many questions for us as well as visitors on how do we behave, and how do we react to some other sounds, to some other lines, to some other objects, and how do we put our bodies in some situations, and in some how do we react in life? Because what's happening then with these exhibitions from Rosana Antoli is that it's life.
I think that was also something that I really enjoyed about the conversation you had, because you talked about the reaction that people were having, especially in the Tate, because there was such long days, and because there was so, 2 very packed weeks and so forth. And I think that's oftentimes also what we sometimes don't have, is this the space to be intimate within an exhibition space, or not just intimate, but to also be vulnerable. You said people were crying because they could feel something. And I think that's also something that was really beautiful to understand.
Thank you.
So someone just asked that they agree with the emotion of the idea of the emotions in the view as a result of the interaction and the artwork, which is really fascinating and powerful.
Yeah, and it's something that we don't take for granted. And I think it's interesting that with Rosana's work, we can see it, and we can be able to disconnect somehow, and to go to this trance that she was talking about, and then from there you can go back to your body. So there's this moment, this glimpse of experience that position yourself in a before and after situation. If you are able to be there and to accept this possibility, again, it's extremely generous from Rosana's side to be able to do these things with something that it's extremely transparent. So it's about sound, it's about light, it's about material, it's about movement, it's about choreographic situations. So she's not hiding the tricks. The tricks are there and are visible. It's like, and it's us embracing them to be able to feel. And we all know that it's difficult sometimes to feel with contemporary art practices. The thing is that I think that in Rosana's work there's still this complexity. So it's not just this desire for feeling; it's feeling understood from a from criticality, and then this idea of the collection of some movements and to observe movements and to be able to read some movements again with this criticality that gives us somehow freedom.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I think it's also, something that also came to mind was this, the space and the non-space that you were that you need the shadows of the work, you need to change the lighting and to change that movement through that as well.
It's super important. The light is something that is really, really, really important. The lights just create the atmosphere, and also they create the shadows, and the shadows have a very poetic connotation, from the artworks. The shadows give layers, to the artwork, and layers are process and layers are time. So it's all related.
Yeah, massively. Okay, I'm just looking at the time now, so just opening up again. If anybody has any more questions, that'll be great. But if not, then I can just remind everybody, everybody about tomorrow's schedule, which has Clemenza Cheviera tomorrow at 2 p.m. London time, and then Paola at 3:30, also London time. We've had, unfortunately, Cecilia Vicuña has unfortunately lost her voice, so she will reschedule, and we'll get back with a new time when we know a little bit more. But it will be rescheduled. So yeah, perfect. And again, if you can, just go on the website and donate and everything. Okay, great. Thank you so much again. It's really wonderful to hear both of you. It's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It has been a pleasure.
Thanks to you, of course.
Mm-hmm.